Hey, fifth grade, welcome back. Today, what we're going to do is two things. First of all, we're going to go over some of the answers that I got back over this Caesar takes powers good and bad chart. And we're going to make any kind of changes you feel like you need to make because if your answers are way off, you're going to want to fix them or add a little bit more. But if you're pretty much in the ballpark, you can just look over your notebook and just keep what you have based off of the stuff I've discussed. The other thing that we're going to add is one little bit of note piece related to Caesar's death. Julius Caesar, unfortunately, is going to get assassinated here to end his reign. So we're going to talk really quickly about how that goes down, and it's going to set us up for some things we're going to talk about over the next couple of days. Okay, so have your notebook out right now real quick as we go through the good and bad, and then obviously you can flip to the next page or just continue down the page when we talk about the death of Julius Caesar. All right, so first thing, again, that we said he's going to do is declare himself dictator for life. And like a lot of these, there's a bunch of different answers, but some of these are pretty straightforward because why is that good for him? Well, obviously, because he's dictator for life. He says, I get to be leader for as long as I want to be, and I want to be leader for the rest of my life. So there. Okay, so obviously, what's good about it is that he gets to be in charge forever. The bad is pretty obvious as well. If you did not like Julius Caesar, there's no way to really get him out of power based on this law. Okay, so that would be bad because nobody else could be leader. Nobody else could kind of bring in their ideas. There's a bunch of different ways to look at that one, but that's pretty much going to take care of that. Okay, down the list here. He only chooses senators that support him. That makes sense. That's good for him because he knows that everybody in the Senate is going to agree with everything he wants to do. So he's going to get whatever laws he wants passed. And if you oppose him, then obviously you're not going to end up getting put into the Senate in the first place. Bad for others, kind of the flip of that. Obviously, if you were somebody who wanted to get into the Senate, but you weren't a friend with Julius Caesar, you pretty much had no shot of getting into the government. So it's good for him because everybody's going to agree with him. It's bad for others because they're not going to have any opinions. They're not going to have their voice heard when it comes to making laws. Gave citizenship to all conquered people. Now, Julius Caesar actually thought that this was a really good idea because he thought instead of taking over all these places and killing people or just taking them over and making them our slaves or whatever, he said, you know what, let's make them Roman citizens. So that's good for Julius Caesar because all these people that get conquered are thinking, he's a pretty good guy. He could have taken us out or he could have kicked us off our land. And instead, he chose to make us part of the Roman Empire. So they're going to respect him for that. The other part, bad for others, is that not everybody in Rome agreed that all conquered people get to be Roman citizens. Because again, Roman citizens get to have input on the government. They obviously have to pay their taxes and other things. But not everybody thought that that was fair, that as more lands get conquered and taken over, they just automatically get to be Roman citizens. So that was kind of bad for other people who disagreed with that fact. Okay, the one about creating jobs for the unemployed. You would think that this sounds like a good idea, but really think about it. Is there enough work out there for everybody to have a job, especially back in the time of Julius Caesar? So it is good for Julius Caesar because think about it, it makes him look great. It makes him look like a person who's a good leader and he's trying to give everybody work and hopefully everybody can make some money. And that's kind of the theory. But the reality is that that's just not true. So the other people or the people who thought it was bad thought there's never going to be enough work for everybody. And if you give everybody a job, then we're not going to get paid as much because we're going to have to take pay cuts and things like that because there's not enough money to go around. There's not enough work and or jobs to go around. So they kind of thought that it was an impossible feat. But at least he tried. So he wanted to make himself look good. Uh, Ordered landowners to use fewer slaves. Now, on the short end, this looks great, right? Because less slavery is just always a good thing. And it's good for Julius Caesar because of exactly why you would think. People who were in the slave class really respected him because they thought, oh my gosh, he's freeing us or he's giving us more rights. So it makes Julius Caesar look great because he's pretty much freeing the slave class. Here's what's up on the bad for others side. It's bad for others because the slave owners themselves are the ones who have a lot of money. And they paid for all those slaves and they wanted to use them to do the work, so they weren't really happy about it. The other part is that they needed the slaves to do all the labor. they needed the slaves on the farms, and they needed the slaves to help build the bridges and roads and temples and things like that. So they didn't really feel that it was fair for Julius Caesar to come in and just free all of their slaves. So that's the good and bad for the slave um, term. But down here at the very bottom, this was probably the trickiest one. And it's not really a bad thing, but I think some of you all found like the main idea of this. He's going to expand the calendar from 10 months to 12 months. So he's going to add a couple more months and some more days and things of that nature. But the big thing is it's good for him because he's literally naming the calendar, the Julian calendar, after himself. And one of those additional months that he's going to add to the mix is July, named after himself. So it makes him look good because it's like Julius Caesar's calendar with a special month just for him. Bad for others is pretty obvious. It was new, not everybody was used to using it. Some people would be confused on how to use it. And also, some people got to the fact here, which was this guy is probably nuts because he's changing the calendar and naming himself after a month, okay, or naming the month after himself, I should say. So they thought he was pretty much going over the deep end as far as taking his power way too seriously, which leads me to the next big step, which is eventually his demise, his assassination. So this slide is what we all want to add to our notebooks, completely new stuff. Okay, and it's very short, but it's very kind of heavy information here about the end of Julius Caesar. All right, so the title itself, The Death of Julius Caesar, so that you remember what we're talking about with these particular bullet points. First fact, many Romans hailed Caesar as a wise ruler. As I just mentioned, places that had been conquered really thought he was great because he just let them join the Roman Empire. The slave class thought he was great because he had pretty much tried to free as many of them as he could. And that made him popular with a lot of folks. The other fact is that kind of his enemies, other people in Rome, thought that he just wanted basically to be a king. He wanted complete control of all the government. He wanted everybody in the empire to love him and pretty much do whatever he wanted. So they had thought he just wanted to be a king, and especially since he claimed himself emperor or dictator for life, they thought, man, this guy's never going away. Okay, so here's the little story about his assassination. On March 15th, 44 BC, a group of senators led by Brutus, who was a friend of his, and another senator named Cassius, decide to kind of get this plot going. And them, again, with all these other senators, are going to surround Julius Caesar outside of the Senate. So almost like in this picture, they're going to surround him as he's leaving the government building, and they pretty much surround him with knives and they stab him to death. Yikes, right? So included down here, I put ouch. Now, clearly, as you can see from this artist's conception, Julius Caesar did not think it was cool for this to happen. But that's going to be the end of Julius Caesar, a pretty violent end for somebody who was actually really well liked. Now, I mention that fact because that's going to set up something that I told you all a little bit about earlier in one of our discussions, which is the fact that there's actually a second triumvirate. Okay, and I'll sneak peek preview it right here. But as you can see, there's going to be some more people involved. There's obviously somebody who is Egyptian and not necessarily Roman that's going to be involved in this conversation. But this is going to lead us to this conversation about the second triumvirate. Okay, so just for today, make sure that you have this information added to the notebook. All the stuff from the good and bad chart from previously, again, if you just listened along and kind of made sure that your answers were good, you should be set on that. All right, so once more, this is the new part. Do you have to share this with me? Yes. Okay. All you got to do, more or less, is share this information on the notebook page, or you all that have been typing it out, same deal. Just send me your Google Doc of this information so that I know that you have it, and then you'll be squared away. All right. And in the next couple days, we're going to be talking again about how the second triumvirate is going to form and who's in it, and just continue this conversation about the Romans and how the empire is going to expand. All right. As always, I hope you all are being safe and staying well, and I'll talk to you soon.